Hi, everybody. Welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we are talking about King and Balloon.
Yeah.
You know, Aaron, were hot air balloons a thing when you were growing up?
Well, I mean, yeah, they've been around for I think. I mean, they've been around for a long time. Hot air
I mean,
balloons. So yeah.
did you have like notebooks that had hot air balloons on the cover?
Oh, those are yeah. I mean, the old Trapper Keepers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hot air balloons were cool. I never wanted to necessarily get in one because I was always worried they would fall down. You know, but we did have it's not a hot air balloon, but we did have around town here. There was a guy that used to fly an ultralight around.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pretty cool. I don't know if you remember those, like motorized gliders.
Sometimes you still see them.
Deal. Yeah, I haven't seen one around here. I mean, he would fly behind my house in that empty area. He would fly around. Oh
wow,
up there.
like in Hurricane. Okay.
Yeah. He was a local guy. They would fly. I don't know where he landed or took off. I guess just from some field somewhere. But when it comes to hot air balloons, I will say down at Foxfire every year they would have a hot air balloons like festival down there, and they would be. I mean, this is way. I don't know what that place even called now.
It's a Koa campground now.
Yeah, this used to be
they've closed most of it.
Yeah, it used to be a privately owned campground that was down sort of between here and Boat's Restaurant, and they eventually put like a water slide in.
Which are gone now.
Hose and Karen both worked at Foxfire, our buddies, but they would have these hot air balloons down there, and they were cool. And every once in a while, you'd be at like a regatta or Rippling Waters, some kind of festival, and some suckers would bring some in for some hot air balloon rides. Did you ever have a notion I mean, you do a lot of crazy stuff. Have you been in one?
So I was traveling with my grandfather one day when I was a lad, and we were driving through St. Albans, and at the St. Albans Mall, there was a hot air balloon there. It was shaped like a roll of Kodak film. So I think this was some sort of promotion put on by the Kodak company.
Yeah.
And so we pulled in, and they were like, yeah, hot air balloon rides. You want to go? And I was like, heck yeah. And so I still remember, like, you know, being in the gondola. I was short at the time, so I mean, my head was even with the sort of the thing, which was fine by me because one of my big fears is accidentally falling out of the gondola. And so it was not going to be in the cards. Yeah. And but anyway,
how loud was it in there?
Well, it was, you know, it's funny because when you're going up, they're firing the jets, you know, and to me, it sounded like a big Coleman stove. Like, you know, when you're lighting the Coleman lantern, Coleman stove, you get that. And it still sticks with me in it. But you go up there, you know, and you're up there for a while. And then they somehow, I'm not exactly sure what they do to let the air out of the balloon. You know, they're pulling ropes and sort of like me in the sailboat. It's sort of the same sort of thing. And you go back down to the ground. This was one of those deals where the balloon was tethered to the ground in some way also. So it was not in any danger of floating away. But I do remember getting the aerial view of the St. Albans Mall, which was thrilling as a child. And it was a good experience.
I've had the chance to get in a hot air balloon a couple times and a helicopter at least once, and I've turned down every single one. And I don't regret it, frankly.
I'm scared of helicopters. I'm scared of them.
I was not exactly thrilled when I had to fly the couple times I've flown. But when I got on the plane, it was sort of like it didn't feel as scary as it is, you know. So I could talk myself into it. But hot air balloon, I don't think they're going to get that safety feeling that an airplane.
You can't get away from the fact that you're in a hot air balloon.
Right. And so I'm not. It's something I never thought would be a good idea. It's funny that you're talking about the Kodak film balloon. It's funny, before the show we spent a good while just talking about old technology and stuff, and it's something I haven't thought about for years. Was the old tiny film places that'd be in mall parking lots? It'd be like a booth. And you drive by or whatever, and you give them your film.
Just drop it off
in a couple
just
hours.
Throw it in the bin,
you know. And sometimes these things were shaped like cameras, or sometimes they'd be shaped like a film roll, or sometimes they were just like a box, you know. And they were everywhere. Like that's something that's long gone. But when you said that, I thought, man, they were bringing this hot air balloon in to advertise almost certainly the film and the development of said film.
Yeah,
you know.
It's
kind of wacky.
One of my favorite TV shows of all time, The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Do you remember that show?
I didn't watch that one.
Okay,
I do vaguely remember it.
I mean, this would have been well after your time, but the lead girl character in the show who I had a crush on, she worked in one of those places, the mall parking lot film development centers. And so, that is a thing that I haven't thought about in a long time. Did you ever do the 1 hour film development thing?
Oh, yeah,
did you ever
absolutely.
pay up the bucks to get it faster?
Yeah. A couple times. Sometimes you could just go to like the mall and you could drop the film off and they'd be like, come back and get it at like 3 or something. Right. I know a lot of times like pharmacies would do it. In fact, everyone developed film back in the day. All the department stores did it. All the pharmacies did it. A lot of them anyway. All the ones at the mall.
Oh yeah, Rite Aid.
And like Walmart up until do they still develop film? Well, I'm not even sure they have.
I don't know if they still develop film, but they definitely still make prints because I still make a lot of prints at Walmart. So.
Yeah, that's one of those technologies that ain't coming back. I don't think. Okay, no. I think we're gonna see that one again.
Well, it's funny you say that. Just like people are in love with retro computers, there are people that will shoot film. They'll pay exorbitant prices to get real film. Yeah. Shoot it on real cameras. It's a lot like listening to an LP. They claim that it's better quality.
You'd think that they would be developing themselves, though, as opposed to taking it somewhere.
That's true. I think that a lot of times, though, the development equipment has become too expensive, but they send it to like a specialty place. You
look like the kind of person that would like have those pans of chemicals that and have the things hanging up on the thing. Did you ever do any of that?
When my dad passed away last year, he used to do that. He had a dark room in his closet.
Yeah.
And so we're going through everything in the house as you do when somebody passes away. And I looked at the stuff, and there was a wild moment where I thought, this is going to be my new thing. I'm going to be a film developer.
You can do it now, Bo. You've already finished your last new thing. You can move right into that.
But at the end of it, it was so big and everything was so heavy. You have to learn things to be able to do that too. It's not an instamatic process.
I don't know. You got that big empty basement, the back part of it that's unfinished or semi-finished. You could put a little dark room in that closet.
I definitely could. I definitely could. But
Eve
I decided
would be down. I'm sure she'd be cool with it.
Oh yeah, I was one hobby over the line, as they say, and so
they do say that, don't they? In your house.
Aaron, let's talk about King and Balloon.
Oh man, we're going right into it, Bode. King and Balloon. Now, I never heard of this. Did you? Until we saw that report.
I had never heard of King and Balloon. This ought to be one of the most generically named arcade games that's ever been made.
It's very much on the nose.
Yeah. I mean, at least I'm trying to think. With Atari 2600 games, a lot of times you'd get the "it is what it is" type game, air-sea battle. Combat, this is right out of that playbook. So King and Balloon, this game comes to us from Namco. Of course, Namco, what haven't they done? They've done Pac-Man, Galaga, tons and tons of arcade classics. Dig Dug, Xevious, Pole Position. What their first arcade game was, Aaron? And I believe you've played this before. Well, I know that I played this at Galloping Ghost. Do you remember what it is?
The first one they did. Geez, I wouldn't know, but it's a Galaxian?
It's called GB, Aaron. Do you remember GB at Galloping Ghost?
I do remember that. Yeah.
I didn't know
that though.
It's a combination. It's sort of like Pinball meets Breakout. It's one of those type games. That was Namco's first ever video game. That was released in '78. This thing came out a couple years later in 1980. This thing, Aaron, this is a vertically oriented single screen shooter in the grand tradition of games like Galaxian, Space Invaders, etc. This game, this was programmed by Shoichi Fukatani. And this guy was a Namco developer. He did your favorite Pac-Man, Aaron. This was the programmer of Super Pac-Man.
Yes.
So there is a King and Balloon Super Pac-Man connection. He also did Tower of Duraga, the NES port of that, which is cited as one of the first arcade action role-playing games. We also have the hardware was designed by Shigechi Ishimura. and he was the man at Namco. He did it all: Miss Pac-Man, Bomb B, Galaxian. He did a game called Cutie Q, which I'm not familiar with. It looks like this is another one of these pinball games. Then finally, there's a credit on Moby for just something called Planning. So I don't know if this is really like a game design thing, but anyway, this is Kazunori Sawano, and he was involved across the spectrum of time. He started out with Galaxian and King of Balloon. He ended up with Prop Cycle. Remember Prop Cycle, Aaron?
I don't remember Prop Cycle.
Oh man, Prop Cycle is great. I believe that this was a tilt for a while. This was a game where you were playing a flying bicycle. You were pedaling a bicycle that had sort of like a hang glider or like a plane attached to it, and you'd fly through rings. It was sort of like a Pilot Wings type game. He was involved with that, and he also produced Time Crisis. So this guy, he spanned the generations, as they say. So anyway, King and Balloon. What do we got with King and Balloon? Well, okay, I'm going to try and break down what's going on with this game. Okay, so you play in this game as a team of castle defenders, as a team of soldiers that are in charge of protecting the titular king, and you're doing battle against not invading enemies in terms of other soldiers or alien spacecraft or anything. Much like the title says, you're doing battle with attacking colored balloons. Not exactly the most fearsome adversary of all time, but that's what we get in King and Balloon. So your job is to protect the king from getting swept away by these hot air balloons that are swooping down from the screen, trying to carry the king away, and at the same time dropping missiles on you. So these are armed balloons, the worst kind of balloon. And so your players, if you can imagine, you've got two knights that are standing on the side of a laser turret or some sort of gun. Okay, and this is a game just like Galaxian, and I think also like Demon Attack, where you see the bullet at the end of the gun. Okay, so you're shooting a scene projectile from the gun up into the space. Okay, you can fire one missile at a time, and you can't fire again while your missile is still on the screen. Okay, this is a joystick and fire button game. You have a two-way joystick and you have a fire button. That's the extent of the controls. Okay, so you fire a missile. If it hits a balloon, the balloon explodes. Or if the missile misses, it'll disappear at the top of the screen. You will not see the missile again. You can fire another missile at that point. The balloons are in a Space Invaders-esque pattern. They're going back and forth, left and right on the screen as a big group. And much like in Galaxian, the ships will swoop down on their own accord, and they will attempt to land underneath where you are. So you can imagine two shelves. On the top shelf, you've got your two guys on either side of your gun, and then on the bottom shelf is the king. And the king is just sort of hanging out, walking around, okay? And so the mission of the balloons is to drop below the first shelf, land on the second shelf, and then the king will walk into the balloon as he's out for his perambulations, and the balloon will slowly start to ascend and carry him off the screen, okay? So your job is to, one, protect the king at all costs. If the king is swept up into a balloon, you shoot the balloon, and the king will drop harmlessly back to the second shelf. Okay, you complete stages by destroying all of the balloons on the screen. There are 42 balloons on the screen. Okay, there you get score for destroying the balloons, and if you manage to destroy a balloon while that is carrying the king, you get even more points. So the whole point of this thing is that it's a risk reward situation where it's risky to let the king get swept up in a balloon, but if you really want to maximize your score, you want that to happen because you want to be able to destroy the balloon that's carrying the king. This is an old school scoring game, Aaron. The points range from 8 points all the way up to 150 points. That doesn't include a sort of bonus encounter where if two balloons kind of swoop down together, sometimes they'll join forces and conglomerate into a mega balloon. You can shoot that for really, really big points. And if you can get that down to the bottom of the screen, let the king be carried away by the mega balloon, you're really doing good. So this is a 2-player game, hot seat. You trade places, and it is a high score game. Of course, this is a game of high score. The one of the most, if not the most interesting mechanic in this game is that you cannot die in this game. The missiles that destroy your players does not affect your life count. In this game, much like in real life, when in the spring when kings go off to war, it's always the peasants that end up getting hurt and killed while the nobles are just sort of riding around. And so this is just like this with the king. So the king, unless the king is swooped off to another castle, you can essentially play forever. When the king is swooped off, then you lose a life. I think you start out with 3 kings, and you lose the kings as time goes on. So that is essentially the game. Aaron, what were your first thoughts when you fired up King and Balloon?
Well, so I was telling you before the show, I was baffled that I've never heard of this because it's my type of game. I'm going to introduce the chud to this, and we're going to be all over it with some high score action. This game is very, very, very similar in some ways to Galaxian, including the setup of the balloons. Probably the same. I don't know if it's the exact same number of balloons. And when the balloons join forces, it's very similar to when the little armada comes down in Galaxian. That's where you can get a lot of points if you can shoot them. But it's, of course, in this case, you've got to shoot the same target basically 3 times to get all the points. It's like they took Galaxian and then screwed with it. But it's not totally the same as Galaxian because it's also sort of like, I don't know, sideways Pooh Yan a little bit. It reminds me a little bit of Pooh Yan. But it's sort of I don't think I've ever played a game where you could just die over and over and not care. And when I first started playing it, I thought, okay, you get 3 lives with a gun and 3 kings. But that's not true.
Not true, right?
You've got unlimited. I guess the guys have, I assume they had crossbow or something since they're shooting balloons, but you're right, it could be, who knows what it is. But you shoot. It is
sort of like a massive. It's sort of like a massive crossbow that's on rollers.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to
or something. But you shoot, like you said, the exact same way you do in Galaxian, 1 shot at a time. So that limits that you want to take good shots. Now if the difference in this and Galaxian is these balloons come down hot and heavy, so really you're gonna being limited in this is less limiting than it is in Galaxian. Because there's a lot more lower stuff to shoot more often, if that makes any sense. The angle with the king reminds me sort of, he lumbers around the bottom of the screen like a doofus.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna turn up the game volume just for a second so you can hear what it sounds like, because I think it's worth hearing on the show. When this game it talks. And so when you hear it talk, when you hear the game talk, it blows your mind that it's so old, and you can he'll say bye, he'll say help. It's quite neat, the talk, so I like that aspect of it. But I don't think I've ever played a game quite like it in my whole life. It's a difficult game. I looked at some of the scores, I did better at the arcade version than I did in the Amiga version. But I played it secondly, so it may just be because I played a ton of the Amiga version, you know what I'm saying, and got better. The sounds sound a little different, but gameplay-wise, it wasn't totally dissimilar to where I thought to myself, hey, I'm just better at the arcade version. But it's a game protecting the king and not caring about your own death. You're right, it's a risky proposition because the king's not that hard to shoot when he gets picked up. If you can limit the amount of balloons that are left on the screen, it makes the game a lot easier because then you can just kind of kick back. There's no time limit, and so you can just let the king get kidnapped over and over, and then you can just shoot the balloons and pick him up, have a laugh. You don't have to care if you get shot. But what makes the game tricky is when there's a lot of traffic at the top of the screen. If you don't catch the king before he hits that armada, he's almost impossible to shoot amongst all the other balloons. And so it makes that that's the challenge, I guess, right there, Bo.
There's a couple things gameplay wise that are really unique aside from what we've already talked about. One of the things is that, like you said, this is one of these games where, unlike Space Invaders, where the invaders are continuously descending, and the closer you get to the end of a stage, the more challenging the enemies are to shoot, because they increase their tempo in terms of, and they also descend. They physically descend towards you and run into you. In this game, because you can die as many times as you want, it doesn't really matter. The enemies do not descend in a row like they do in Space Invaders. And like you said, the end part of the stage is often the easiest part of the stage.
Yeah.
The challenge in this game comes as you progress through the stages, the enemies drop more missiles, they fly down more frequently, and I believe they carry the king off more quickly. The speed of your ascending balloon is increased as you go along. I found this game to be a refreshing change of pace compared to a lot of Galaxian style games, just because for once I could sort of get killed with abandon and not care about it. I like the fact that as the king is ascending, you are invincible against the balloon, so you can stand right on top of the balloon as it's ascending with the king, and then pick it off right away. Again, when I play a video game, I want to feel like I'm cool. You know, I want to pull off some sweet moves. And this game lets you pull off some sweet moves. Not only when, you know, these balloons, they constantly fly down. If they don't pick up the king, they'll fly back up again. Even if they don't have the king, when they're passing through that first shelf again, they will not hurt you. They'll not hurt you. I thought this game, unlike Galaxian, really unlike any other space shooter I've played, it was sort of a relaxing experience. I never felt stressed. I never felt like my heart rate never really went up. It was sort of enjoyable. Now, I can see completely why some people might not want that, because when you play a space shooter, a lot of times you want that frenetic feeling. You want that feeling of, oh man, all my senses have got to be turned up to 10. This is a different sort of game. It's almost like it's almost a little bit more. I don't want to say it's more tactical, but you're thinking about things differently than you are when you're playing almost any other shooter, because your ship is not the point of focus. I can't think of another space shooter like this where you really spend most of your time focused on something else other than your ship. Can you?
No. Like I said, there are the elements of Satan's Hollow in here, which, of course, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
This game, it's like someone said, let's make something for good old A. Mm-hmm. And because I took elements of different games I like and just kind of mushed them and amalgamified them in this weird Galaxian escape. You're right. This is a Galaxian, but it's not. It's not as manic. It's still, I was getting it's not like you kick back and play Neo Turf Masters.
No,
this thing ain't that. Man. But what gets you in is like the aliens or balloons, I should say. Their shots will come down diagonally.
They hone in on you. They hone in on you.
They're real tough. Those diagonal shots are brutal. That's not something you always see. And the king, he can get kidnapped over and over instantly, depending on how many balloons are down there. And as soon as he gets to the bottom, he'll get kidnapped again. And as you get into I'm not saying later stages, because I didn't get super far into this game. I tried, but I watched some other better people play. You can get into the further stages, and it gets really crazy with the king. Yeah. But I do like the king. This is one of those games where the audio adds a ton to me. The king, he yells for help, and it's awesome when he does that, and then he thanks you when you save him, and when he says thank you, I love his voice. It's very friendly. and like he's like you said, it's like he's just not screwing around.
Right.
And when he floats back down to Earth after almost dying, he's like, "Thank you," And then when he says bye, God knows where he's gone. And I mean, did you see a backstory or anything to this? I've got no idea what's happening.
No,
here.
in fact, I have the operator's manual here.
Yeah.
And so if there was going to be a backstory, I guess it would be included here, but there is not. It goes right into the gameplay and all of the options. So unfortunately, there's no lore for King and Balloon. That doesn't mean there couldn't be some good fan fiction written.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. You get little stage markers with umbrellas, which is nice. I mean, listen, Namco, they would beat that horse to death. This has got elements of Galaxian, a lot of them, which were also in Galaga, and a myriad of other games. If you're used to their Starfield, you're used to the way their font looks, you're used to the way they've got their screen set up, it's all there. It's exactly like you'd think it'd be. They didn't change it for a long time, They put the high score and then one up, everything in the middle. It's got 1 to 2 players, a hot seat. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it can be frustrating, and I will say this is a game. Like I've played a lot of Galaga and Galaxian. And I'm not great at Galaxian, but I'm pretty darn good at Galaga. And eventually, you get into you find your angle in the game. How to make your way. I haven't found my angle into this game yet, and so I'm not that. It's very similar to Galaxian. I'm just not there yet.
Well, this game essentially runs on the Galaxian board. It says, according here to the arcademuseum.com, it says this game uses 2 Z80 microprocessors. The first one runs the hardware, which is essentially the same as Galaxian, but without the Starfield generator. So even though this game does have a Starfield, I think that the Starfield is using a little bit lesser technology. It doesn't. It possibly is doing a cheat Starfield compared to the one in Galaxian, and then the second Z80. Yeah, it's not in color. The second Z80 actually just drives the audio. It controls all of the audio samples, which back in in the day that was a big deal to have the audio samples. 1981. So
and the audio in this is. I mean, some of the like when you shoot when you shoot the balloon stuff, that's directly from Galaxian. I recognize that. So they reuse some of the audio, but. The voice samples in this are, I mean, top shelf. They're top shelf. They sound great. I mean, if you play something like Gorf, what I'm saying, or Wizard of War, and you get that like robotic sounding or Berserk, this sounds like a dude.
Right,
and
right.
And this isn't the same. That's just in the same ballpark here. It's not like this thing came out in '85 or something. So they had something good. And I read. And you may have planned on covering this, but I read that the Japanese version of this, it's still in English, but it's got a heavily Japanese accent. Did you see that?
Oh yeah. It's the helper. All of the different consonants that they put at the end of English words, and it is somewhat unfortunate that they re-recorded that for the American audience because that's still whenever I play Street Fighter 2, I love hearing Thailand, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
I will say this: both the U.S. and Japanese versions are in the Mister. If you have a Mister, and so you can go in there and experience this. I did. That's where I played the arcade side of this. But yeah, having not played this before, I'm assuming this thing didn't get a real good foothold in the States. And
this by all accounts, this was a failure. I believe that this is really I looked around online and on YouTube, and I believe that this particular arcade is only on location in like 3 places in the United States. There's on Clav, it says that there's only 9 known instances of this machine being owned ever. And it says of them, 6 are dedicated original machines, 3 are only circuit boards. So I mean, this is not a machine. I don't remember seeing this at Galloping Ghost. That's not to say it wasn't there, because there's so many machines there.
Yeah.
But it's definitely on the rarer side. I can see why this was not a hit. I think that if you're in the mood as an arcade goer to play a shoot 'em up, most of your audience is going to gravitate towards a Galaxian type game. I think that, especially when you consider that in 1981, this was also when Galaga was released. The King and Balloon is great, but it's not going to hold a candle to Galaga for straight up action. I think it's just a little bit. It's not even though it's a. I think that there's some mechanics in here that add depth to the gameplay. There were too many trees in the forest at the time. What do you think, man?
I will say that controversial statement forthcoming. I think I like this more than Galaxian. I mean,
more than Galaga, you mean?
No, I mean Galaxian.
Oh, because you like Galaxian. You like Galaxian more than Galaga. Yeah.
Because maybe it's because I've played it for so long, but I mean, the slant on this is real neat. I like, and it's so. Again, I'm a big fan of Pooh Yan, and this has similarities, but it's so goofy. I like goofy, and the fact that the king. Part of this reminds me of remember when we played the game where Happy remade it, the diner game, Shays Maxim.
Oh my gosh!
And at the bottom of the screen, the cook just rumbles around down there for no good reason. That's
similar.
What the king reminds me. He's down there screwing around. It's just like he didn't have a care in the world, and then he won't go back in the castle. You idiot king! I like the fact that you've got multiple kings. How do they explain that? And I guess you've got all of his different heirs are coming out. It's like, well, I'm next.
I love the theme of this game.
Yeah.
I would rather play this than Galaga or Galaxian, personally. I like
that.
wacky, I'm sort of done with the sort of space shooter as a concept. Yeah. I think this is a much more interesting game. But I think that, at the end of the day, when you're fighting for quarters in the arcade, another thing that really hurt this game is, unlike a lot of other Namco titles, which were put out by Midway, which were put out by Atari, this game was marketed by good old Game Plan Inc. Aaron, does that company ring a bell?
Yeah, they did some stuff. Game Plan. I can't tell you what they did.
They were mostly a pinball machine company.
Yeah.
In fact, they did one of the pinball machines you own, the real Coney Island. Is a game. Yeah, that's a Game Plan Inc. They had some efforts in the video game. See, they could tell that the winds were shifting. I don't think that they had the money to mass market these machines like Midway and Atari did. That's probably another reason why this game didn't do as well.
I just think that, what would have been nice? Let's get our Booker's hat on for a minute, Boat, and rebook this game. Take everything, take the scrolling spacing to get that out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Put a background on this, sort of like what Salem's Saints Hollow had, but put a noble kingdom scene in the background.
Yeah.
Just a castle in the background or a battlefield or something, because the space part of this, it makes it goofy. It doesn't make any sense that space is involved.
Right.
And why is it scrolling? Because we're not going through space.
Right.
If you get rid of that background, you put something else in there, like a still screen or some clouds or something. It doesn't matter, but not space. And then because otherwise you're like, what is the plot of this? Who knows? Balloons were in space. Like, what's happening? You don't know. But the gameplay's fun. Just the theming's jacked up.
Yeah, and I believe that this was done because of the technology at the time. Having a black background freed up space for other things. They already had the code behind the Starfield. They could already make that work. That was sort of an afterthought probably on their side, but I agree with you 100%. If this thing had come out in like 84 and had a blue background with a kingdom in the background, so you had some clouds, maybe even bring the clouds into the game. It's like a fog of war type thing.
Yeah, like later on.
Yeah,
but I know I've told you my Starfield story, but I'm gonna tell it again because how often I get this chance. When I received a Galaga after I picked it up out of a dumpster. All right, I found out, my buddy said, listen, someone just tossed the Galaga machine, arcade machine, in the dumpster. So you know me, I went and fetched that sucker.
Yeah, you did.
I took it home. And, of course, we didn't do any testing. That's for geeks. We just fired that sucker up. And to my surprise, it came up. But one of the flaws that it had was that the Starfield on it went sideways. It was the strangest thing. And so once I reseeded all the ROMs, I should say, it fixed it. But, yeah, you can if you've got some kind of weird glitch in it, you can have the Starfield go the other way. So, I think this, as an arcade game, I thought it was very fun, Bode.
Now, Aaron, I've got one more question for you here.
Yeah.
Namco, they were definitely on fire in the early 80s. I'm just going to read you a list of their greatest hits
All right.
From this sort of 5-year period. You got Galaxian, Rally X, Pac-Man, Galaga, Bosconian, Dig Dug, Pole Position. It's 79 to 82.
Yeah.
Did anybody else in the arcade scene have a better track record than Namco during that time?
79 to 82. I mean, Atari put out a lot of hits in that era. I mean, yeah, you're right. Because I'm trying to think when Tato really started cranking it up. You're talking there were maybe 4. And Nintendo had a lot of good stuff too in that era too. Because they released all the Donkey Kongs and whatnot. But I mean, those are all top shelf hits. But of course, the arcades were fresh, and the hits back then seemed to stick around a little bit longer mentally. Because there weren't as many to look at. If you look at games from like say '87, there were zillions of great games, but like you had to really stick out to have somebody remember what you were doing, I think. But I mean, you're right. Every one of those you could consider a classic, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just to compare with Tato, since you brought him up, 1979 to 1982, you had Lunar Rescue, Kicks, Space Invaders 2, Crazy Balloon, Elevator Action, and Jungle King, Zookeeper.
Those are all.
So there's some heavy hitters there for sure.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. Wow, those are that's good. That's a good fun list, Bode.
Yeah. All right, Aaron. Let's talk about the Amiga version of
Let's
King and
move
Balloon.
right over to it here. So, of course, I handled that end of the bargain here. And the Amiga version, brand new, just came out in the past few months, King and Balloon. This was developed by a fellow named JoeJoe. JoeJoe did the transcoding, the graphics, sound effects, the music. He does credit our good buddy JOTD for some pre-translations, which I think I think that JOTD like broke down a certain part of this board on one of his previous efforts, and he was able to use that when he did the coding for this transcoding. Of course, this comes from itch.io. If you're a cool guy, if you're too cool for school, go over to itch.io and you'll see a myriad of brand new titles for all the classic computers, including the Amiga. Ton of stuff. I was just on there a couple weeks ago getting a bunch of Next stuff. And of course, I've rated it a few times for arcade titles from JOTD. But that's where this is from. And I'll give you the link here in a minute to where you can pull it out. According to the site, this is a 1-to-1 arcade port of the game. He calls it for the Amiga 500. I would wager it will run on anything that meets the memory requirements, which is 512 kilobytes. The Amiga version of this does feature 1 or 2 players, keyboard and joystick support as well. It's got pretty much, from what JoeJoe says, you get pretty much everything with a 1-to-1 transfer except the opening tune. This game does have an opening tune. We didn't mention the opening tune when we talked about it. Any thoughts on it's a little ditty. I mean, it doesn't. What do you think about it?
To me, it was not memorable to me at all. I couldn't hum it now if you asked me.
Right. Yeah. I played the game dozens of times.
It wasn't like Mappy, Map. Oh,
Mappy. Yeah. That's a great song. Yeah, now it's stuck in my head. So this game, don't get me wrong, this song's okay, but it's not going to kill you if you don't have it in the Amiga version. The Amiga version, listen, what I just said about the other version, it pretty much applies. I'd say I've played more than most of these translations and transcodes and semi-transcodes to the Amiga. I think this one is right there. I mean, I think that it's this one doesn't feel slow to me. It doesn't feel like you don't have the same control. I will say, of course, there is a difference that I can't put my finger on, because when you play the arcade version, well, I can put my finger on some of it. The sound is not exactly the same. In fact, it's probably better technically.
It just there's a different timbre to the sound. I don't know exactly how to explain it. Yeah.
Well said, Bo. That's why you're the music man. It's the other sound. The sound on the arcade version sounds a little more tinny or maybe or more computery. This sounds more like a guy's voice, but it's the same. It's probably just sampled, I assume, but who knows? I don't know how he did it. We're too dumb. I've played both these. The controls are fine on this. I just found out not too long ago that there's a cheat. Well, I knew there was a cheat menu. If you go to the credits, if you hit F1 when you're on the opening screen, you can hit F1 and go to a screen that gives like a credit screen. And on the credit screen, it says like cheat menu with like some question marks, like how do you get there? And then I was on this itch.io page and it just tells you how to get there. So mystery solved, Boat. If you hold down the 3 keys, I think it's R. I'll tell you in a second. But anyway, when you hold down 3 keys, you get RMJ. If you hold them down at the same time, you get to the cheat menu. The cheat menu will allow you to turn off guard collision, turn off king catching, and also turn on auto fire. That's probably the one you'd get the most use out of. And you could also turn on. You could add more lives instead of the 3.
I would like to try this out with auto fire just to see. I mean, of course, it would change the game tremendously. I just like to try it out.
Auto fire would be the thing is, I didn't try it. But auto fire on this would be odd because again, you only shoot once.
Well, you know what? You're right. I misinterpreted what auto fire. I was thinking about rapid fire. Like you can just fire as many bullets as you want.
If that was part of it, then that would make a big difference. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Or the fact that you don't have to catch the king, or you don't have to like worry about the king.
Then you're just blowing away balloons with no recourse.
And when you get to the cheat menu, it also has his credits in there, and also at the bottom it says. Germany 2024. So clearly JoeJoe is a German fellow on this thing. Again, if you want to play 2 players, when you're setting on the main screen, it gives you it's sort of at the top. It gives you sort of the various ways that you would pick the different modes you can go into. But you can have 1 or 2 players, and then like I said, F1 goes to the cheat screen. So. Bo, did you play this before or after you played the arcade version? And
I played the Amiga version first.
Me too.
And I'll tell you how long I stuck with the Amiga version before I went to the arcade version.
Yeah.
I didn't really learn how to play the Amiga version or the King and Balloon until I started playing the arcade version. I played the Amiga version and I was playing, and I was like, well, this game is first of all, let's get this out of the way first. This is not the final release of King and Balloon. This is currently 0.94. So it's almost ready for prime time.
And he has been bug fixing a lot over the past
but not
days.
yet.
Yeah.
And so I was playing it and I was like, man, sometimes I'm losing lives and sometimes I'm not. And I was not paying attention to what was going on. And I didn't read any of the docs. And I was like, well, the life system is screwed up because I keep dying and I'm not losing any lives. You know, and I was like, well, this game's not ready for prime time yet. I'm going to switch over to the arcade version. And then I was like, arcade version, doing the same thing. And then I was like, maybe I need to pay attention to what I'm doing here. Yeah. And then I realized what was going on. So, I started out playing the Amiga version. I went to the arcade version. These are, aside, Mitsuyama points out that there's no Starfield in this game. The game is not the worst for it. The Starfield, like we pointed out, really doesn't add much. But the game is pretty identical. Pretty identical. You can go back and forth, at least I could, and not really notice much of a difference other than, like you said, the sound is just different. It's just a different sounding same sound. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's not off-putting or anything.
No, not at all.
You know?
Not at all. And so, well, now that we see the Starfield side by side with the no Starfield, I will say the Starfield does add a little bit. It adds a little pizzazz.
It's better than nothing, but it could have been something. This could have been something that you could have done more with. But now it's nothing to do about that now, unless somebody wants to go in there and meddle with it. But I played the Amiga version quite a bit after I played the arcade version, and play-wise, like I said, I did better on the arcade version, but I still did about the same. And I don't blame the game at all. It plays a good game both ways. So, I think you're going to be in good shape either way. Just to to be a thorough fellow, I went over to see what, hey, what's he charging for this game? And it's, of course, it's one of those deals on itch.io where you name your own price. So if you've got like a 512K A500 or something above that, which I think that's most everybody these days, you can play this. And he suggests the price of €3. I don't know how many. What is it, about $5, boat, something like that?
Something like that.
That's that, and of course that's a suggestion, obviously. But I mean, otherwise, I think you would be in with a win here to go that route. I mean, I think you've got a winner here, and I think it's one of those games. And this is one of the things I like about these transcodes and stuff. Even, yes, could you go to MAME or whatever place? Yes, you could. All right. But me and you would never have found out about this game if it wasn't for the transcode.
You're exactly right. You know what? I rail against transcodes, and I didn't really rail against sort of, everybody making ports instead of new stuff, but I sort of, expressed some sort of dissatisfaction with that. But that point that you just made completely turned me around. Because you're right.
Wow.
We found out about so many great games thanks to ports, like Hoffman doing that Nightmare MSX port. I would have never found out about that game if he hadn't done that port. So I rescind everything bad I've ever said about transcodes or ports.
I want to give a little shout out to our good buddy, the Pajako, who actually dug up the fact that this actually did get a home port boat, King of Balloon, to, of all things, the MSX. Which, as I mentioned, everything gets an MSX port all the time. And, of course, that being in Japan, this was probably a popular enough game for Bug Bite to do a port of it to the MSX. So there's an MSX port of this. If you're, I can't vouch for the quality. MSX stuff probably pretty good, frankly.
It's weird because Bug Bite is a European developer.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if this got a ZX.
This wasn't a port for the Japanese MSX market. This is a port for the European MSX market.
Good point, Boater. Overall, though, I mean, there's not much to say about this that hasn't been said about the arcade version. It's a solid game. It's a good translation. He's still working on it, so you're almost certainly going to get some updates in the near future. Like I said, he'd worked on it recently, including if you go to the itch.io page, he's actually, people will say, hey, this needs fixed. This is what's wrong. And he'll acknowledge it. He'll go in and fix that exact thing. I saw that a couple times that he would do that. So I love when guys. That's another thing I like about itch.io. You can actually talk to the guy making the game. Hey, why don't you do this in the game?
It is the perfect platform for the retro enthusiast to not only download all the best games that come out for a system, but also to interact with the developer and support the developer. I just can't say enough good things about Itch.
So we will leave the itch.io link at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go back and the way I usually do itch.io, and I don't feel bad about doing this because I go through and I'll pick out some games, and if I find something I like, I will throw in a couple bucks. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yes.
And so, and that's a good thing about it. So if you feel like floating old JoeJoe a few dollar bills, and the way he was talking, it looks like he's going to start cranking up more of this sort of thing. Good. And so why not grease the wheels a little bit? That's the way I look at it. I wouldn't mind having some of this other stuff. In fact, I'm telling you, we talked this about. I would love to see developers do this. I mean, yes, transcodes are one thing, but this is a perfect example of a game that you could actually, with probably some pretty minor modification, you could probably improve the looks of it anyway. That'd be nice. I'll just like Happy did with Shays Max, but go in there and just make it more interesting, make it better, or
Right. Happy's really the perfect example of like how to do ports right. Because
we're talking about
not only does he just what is it?
So I just want to say we're talking about happy coding. So
happy coding, yeah. Highriser.itch.io. Because he not only does he port the game over, but he adds stuff like high score tables that stay, permanent high score tables, bezels and stuff like that. Like I love when stuff like, and again, this would be something that might be an option in the future if you keep funding JoeJoe with your generosity.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, please support both those fellas. I played some of Happy stuff on the ZX Next show, and like he had this asteroids. He did an asteroids port, and one of the options was to strafe And it's it changes the feel of Astros. Like, it was the strangest thing. The strafe, these Astros, I've never seen like it. So I'm going to put happy over 2. Anyway, so I think, just in conclusion, but we both give this one a big thumbs up.
Big thumbs up for King and Balloon.
Good job, JoeJoe. And thank you, JOTD, for making it happen, brother.
If you ask any Amiga repair technician what the most problematic component of a motherboard is, they'll undoubtedly mention capacitors. The electrolytic capacitors that shipped with the Amiga are 30 years old or older at this point, and each one is a ticking time bomb waiting to explode battery acid all over your motherboard, sometimes damaging it irrevocably. Don't wait. Replace your capacitors now. Full capacitor kits for every Amiga model are available now at RetroRewind.ca. Don't want to attempt the repair yourself? Use their white glove recap service and leave the intricate removal and soldering process to the professionals using industry standard equipment. Use the promo code Amigos10 at checkout and save 10% off your cap kit or service. Remember, make RetroRewind.ca your first stop for all your Commodore computer needs.
All right, Aaron, what do we got coming up next week? Oh,
bam.
It's freaking Prophecy, the Viking Child. Prophecy 1, the Viking Child. And convoluted names, here we are.
Cool looking box, though.
Yeah, it's what a Gianna sisters like.
Well, no. Really? Think so?
Yeah,
I think
it's that same sort of art style.
I think it looks nice, and I don't know anything about this one. Now, I assume there were many Prophecies, 5, 6, 10 of them. And this is another one. You say this is a platformer?
This is a platformer. This is going to be an interesting one, Aaron, because a lot of people compare this to Wonder Boy 2, the Dragon's Trap on the old Master System, which was
that's one of the ones I don't have.
It's a pretty seminal game, I believe. I think it was for the Master System. I want to say that's correct. But anyway, yeah, this is a platformer that's going to have a little bit more depth than other ones we might have covered in the past, for sure.
Very good. Hey, just a couple
Wonder Boy in Monsterland. Thank you, Miss Yama.
I do have that one, actually. Couple little tidbits where we roll out. We'll be conducting an interview Sunday with Dean Bent, Dean Bent. We interviewed him. We're going to put the video out this weekend. It was a real interesting interview. This guy went from the lowly front desks at US Gold answering phones to working at NVIDIA and not answering phones, but being a big deal. It's a real rags to riches story, Bo. I'm looking forward to getting that out there. I want to mention that because we never mentioned this, and I told Brent we need to start. We appreciate everybody, all our patrons, all the people that tune in every week. If you could drop us a like and maybe even hit the old subscribe button, we're going to go down that road. But by God, we never say it. So I'm trying to be more like a proper guy. And
the important thing is that we led with it so the most people see it.
Well, see, the way I like to do it is sneak it in the back. That's the way I like to do it. I've got to learn. You start out by sticking it at the very end when you think about it at the last second, and then eventually it'll move up front. That's the way we do it. You got anything to add, Boater?
Listen, I am going to get out of here. I've got some marching band judge training I must attend. I've got a Zoom meeting at 7:00 tonight. You want to join? You want to come over? You can sit in.
Okay, are we going to talk about old games at all? You need to talk about that football game we watched.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, as always. Thanks for everybody that tunes in on Twitch. We do broadcast the show live every week on Twitch, twitch.tv/amigosretrogaming. We always have a real active chat in there before and after the show. And if you are a patron, you get access to the full uncut audio every week of the stuff that doesn't make the live show. And you get access to our Discord server. You get a free magnet at the end of the year. It's not really free because you're paying us money, but it's a good deal. I promise. I wouldn't lie to you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week. And until then, adios.
Adios.
Amigos is made possible by contributions from listeners like you. Patreon supporters help choose the games we play, receive exclusive magnets, and get access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server. Visit patreon.com/Amigos Podcast if you'd like to support the show and join our community.